Hello everyone and welcome to this new video tutorial on Python for Finance. Here in this video tutorial we are going to learn how to calculate the current ratio using Python. We will calculate for a group of companies. We will also understand what is the current ratio, how to calculate it and how to interpret it. And then we will also use Plotly in order to plot the different current ratios for 4 different companies: Apple, Microsoft, Google and Facebook. You can apply the same analysis for any other companies that you want. It's super easy. So let's start now. By the way, the code, you can find it in my blog, which is in the description of the video. Here you will find a description, what is current ratio and so on. And then you will find the Python code that we will be building together. Good, so let's start. I will be using Jupyter Notebook and also a free API called Financial Modeling Prep. For all of you who have been following my videos, you will be familiar with it. Otherwise, I will also recommend you to have a look into it. You have the link in the description of the video as well. Or you can find the link to the API in my blog. It's a free API with plenty of financial data. So that will make our work very easy. Good, so now let's start. What is current ratio? So current ratio is one of the most used liquidity measures to study the liquidity in different companies. So it's basically mean how well a company will be able to fulfill its short-term bills or obligations. And it's basically calculated by taking 2 elements in the balance sheet of the company, the current assets and the current liabilities, and dividing them. So current assets are the cash and cash equivalent, marketable securities, account receivables, inventory, and so on. And then the current liabilities, it includes account payables, income tax payables, and other liabilities that are expected to be paid in less than a year. So the current ratio, I will write here the formula, is current assets divided current liabilities. Good. So we need 2 elements here, current assets and current liabilities, and we will get that from the free API I mentioned before. Good, so let's start now by getting the data that we need. So first of all, we will import request, and then we will also use pandas. So I will recommend you to run this code just to be sure that you don't get any error. In case you get an error, it means that you need to install the package. So for that you can Google it. It's basically pip install pandas. It's a very powerful library to create pandas DataFrame and to manage and work with the data. Good, so now I will create a list of companies which will be the ones that we will analyze. So it will be Apple. Here the API is accepting the ticker of the company, so this is the ticker for Apple. Google, let's also use Facebook, and then Microsoft. And here again, as I mentioned before, you can add as many companies as you want. In one of my previous videos, or also you can find it in my blog, I will probably also add the link to the description, so check below. I show you how to get the ticker of all the companies operating within a sector, so that instead of hard coding the values here, you will get a list using Python and the API that we will be using. But that's in a different post in my blog or in a different video. Feel free to jump into it, otherwise hard code here the tickers. Good, so what we want to do is we want to take the current assets and the current liabilities from each of the companies that we have here. So for that we can create a loop. Okay, so let's do for company in companies. And here we need to make a request to the API in order to get our balance sheet. So I will create a balance sheet variable. Here is where we will store the whole balance sheet. And then we can do request get, and here I will pass the URL that we will be using. So the URL, go into my blog and copy it, because I will not type in it. So this is the API endpoint that will give us annual balance sheet information. And then you see here I am using f-string, so add here the f, because that way we can pass the company, which will be the ticker, so first will be Apple, then Google, then Facebook, and so on, into this part here of the URL, so that then we make a requesting the data for that particular company. Good, hope that makes sense. Now let's see if this is working by printing balance sheet. Let me put it here for comparing companies. Okay, this seems to be working. So now what we get is so in the balance sheet, and we only get Microsoft because it's the last value that was passed as company. But here, if you see, we get a dictionary which contains a key financials, and within the financials we have a list. You see, this is a list of dictionaries, and each dictionary contains one financial year. So this is the first dictionary, year 2019. Then the second dictionary contains the year 2018, and so on. Okay, so we are interested on the first element because it's the most recent financial year. And you see here we have a key and the value for each of the balance sheet positions. So now here within balance sheet, we can easily do financials in order to parse the dictionary, and then let's say that we want to get the current assets. Let's see what is the key here. Current assets, here it is, total current assets. We can paste it here, and then here we also need to pass the position of the index, so it will be the first element in the list. That's why we index 0, and this will give us the value of the total current assets, and in effect we get the value of the total current assets. So this can be stored in a variable, current ratio, current assets, for example. Then current liabilities. So the current liabilities key was, I think, total current liabilities. I'm copying this from my blog as well. So this is the key where we will retrieve the current liabilities, and then the current ratio can be calculated by dividing current assets by current liabilities. And let's see if this works. Okay, we get an error string. Okay, we need to convert from a string into a float, otherwise the mathematical operation will fail. So we can do that by passing float. So this will convert this variable from a string into a number. And now we run it again, and we print current ratio. We get the current ratio of Microsoft, which is the last company that we pass here, right? So this is useful, but we would like to see together the current ratio from these 4 companies, and not only the one from Microsoft, which is the last element in the list. So to do that, we can create a dictionary, and we will append, or we will add each of the elements here. So we will calculate current assets, current liabilities, and current ratio for each of the companies, and we will add it into a dictionary. So let's create a dictionary, current ratio dictionary. This will be an empty dictionary, and then we will be adding the value for each of the stocks from the current assets, current liabilities into this one. So we need to create it here, and then we will need to have a key that will be the name of the company. So this will be the nested dictionary that will go into our main dictionary, and this company will be replaced by Apple, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft. So that way we will have a way to distinguish between the 4 companies. Hope that makes sense, otherwise you will see now what I mean. So we need to include this within the 4, because now we are going to do it for each company, and then these current assets we need to add it to our dictionary. So we will have here a key that will be current assets, right, this and this. So we will have the name of the dictionary with the key of the company, and then the current assets key as well, which will contain the value of the current assets. We do the same for the current liabilities, so we can replace this one here, and then as well we need to do the same for the current ratio. So just by replacing the keys we can do that. And now if I run the code and I print the current ratio dictionary, we should have, oops, if I don't have a typo. Okay, we have an error, indentation level, so there's an extra space here I need to remove. Now if I run the dictionary, we can see that we get for each of the 4 companies the current assets, current liabilities, and current ratio. Good. However, I see something does not really work here, because the value from the current ratio is the same in each of the companies, which doesn't make sense, right? So yeah, the problem is that before we store the value of Microsoft in the current assets and current liabilities, and then we are not updating this in our loop. So we need to replace current assets by this value here, which will contain the current assets for the company that we are looping through, and then replace current liabilities by the value in the dictionary containing current liabilities for that company. Okay, now let's see, and now we see that the current ratio has changed for each of the companies. Good, so this seems to be working. Next, we can convert this into a pandas data frame, because that will allow us to work with the data and also to plot it more easily. So we can do that. Let's create a new variable that will be called current ratio data frame. This will be our pandas data frame, and we can use pandas data frame and then use the method from dict. And then this method, what it does, it takes a dictionary and converts it into a pandas data frame. So we take our dictionary and we pass it as argument, and then we use orient equal index. And now if I print this, we should have a pandas data frame. Good, looks nice. So now we have a nice table with the current assets for each of the company, current liabilities, and current ratio. Next, let's also plot this using Plotly. So Plotly is a very powerful library to plot graphs like bar charts, scatter graphs, and so on, a lot of functionalities. I recommend you to have a look, to go to Plotly, put Plotly in Google, you will find it. You need, of course, to install it because it's also a package or a library. Then once you install it, you will be able to use all the functionalities. I recommend you to follow the documentation in Plotly in order to install the package. Well, so once you have it installed, then you can use Plotly express as px. This will import Plotly, and then we need to create a figure object, and then here we can specify that we want to have a bar chart, and then here we need to pass as an argument our pandas data frame, so that we can pass as an x. So the x values in our graph will be our index, because I want the name of the companies as the x values of our chart. So for that we can pass the data frame name and then do .index that will select the 4 companies, and then our y will be our current ratio. So for that we can select the current ratio value by passing the name of the data frame and selecting the k, or the name of the header for that column, which is current ratio. Okay, and like that we can call figure so, and then we are getting an error. Here I am missing a comma, so now if I put the comma and I run it again, I get another error. Okay, so something super weird has happened here, because I'm getting an error in Jupyter Notebook. I was investigating and I couldn't find the issue, so this is the error. And apparently the problem is with Jupyter Notebook. Maybe it's not compatible with Plotly, but should not be, because I haven't used it before. But for some weird reason this code doesn't work in Jupyter Notebook. However, when I change to Colab and I run the same code, it works. So here I am getting the graph. So if any of you have an idea of what this is happening with Jupyter Notebook, this error, then I will appreciate if you can add it as a comment. Anyway, hope that works for you. If you are not using Jupyter Notebook, it will work. If you use any other Visual Studio Code or any other source code editor, it will work. But here is the end result. So we have the current ratio for 4 companies, and you hover over, you see the value, current ratio for Facebook, Microsoft, and so on. And then how to interpret this, right? So we see that Apple, for example, has a current ratio of only 1.5, while Facebook has a current ratio of almost 4.5. So what is a good current ratio for these companies? First of all, when you use the current ratio, use it with comparable companies. So in this case, we are using companies operating in the technological sector or industry, which are big companies, so they are comparable, or peer companies. And then we can really compare the current ratio between them. It doesn't make sense to compare current ratios between companies which are not similar. Having said that, here, what is a good current ratio? It depends on how you look into that, but for me personally, I prefer, for example, how Apple current ratio looks like, because it only have 1.5, and it means like Apple is managing the current assets on a efficient way, because they don't have so many current assets to cover the current liabilities, which means they can use the current assets for other things, and they are using it much better than, for example, Google or Facebook. So Facebook, with a current ratio of 4.3, it means that they have enough current assets to cover more than 4 times the current liabilities. For me, that's too much. So they have assets that they are not using efficiently, and that could be improved, right? So also it's not good to have a current ratio below 1, because it means that you have a negative working capital, and it means that you don't have enough current assets to cover your 1-year term obligations. That's all. Hopefully you have found this video tutorial useful. Feel free to subscribe to my channel and to share the content. See you in the next video.